Mic check.
Mic check.
With enthusiasm. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
My name is Michael Stone.
My name is Michael Stone.
I've come here from Toronto,
I've come here from Toronto,
New Mexico,
New Mexico,
Montreal,
Montreal,
and Occupy Wall Street.
and Occupy Wall Street.
So I want to talk a little bit
So I want to talk a little bit
about what I've seen
about what I've seen
in some of the other Occupy movements,
in some of the other Occupy movements,
what I've learned,
what I've learned,
and some of my fears,
and some of my fears,
and some of my concerns
and some of my concerns
about the next stage
about the next stage
of this movement.
of this movement.
The next stage of this movement
The next stage of this movement
is going to be
is going to be
how we deal with conflict,
how we deal with conflict,
internal conflict,
internal conflict,
and the repression
and the repression
that will certainly come
that will certainly come
when the people in these buildings
when the people in these buildings
and the police
and the police
become uptight.
become uptight.
So first of all,
So first of all,
this is not a protest.
this is not a protest.
One thing I've learned
One thing I've learned
in this process
in this process
is that this is not a protest. This is a movement.
this is a movement.
It's hard for the media
It's hard for the media
to articulate
to articulate
what this movement is
what this movement is
because we don't have demands.
because we don't have demands.
But this is not true.
But this is not true.
Movements don't operate with demands.
Movements don't operate with demands.
Movements operate with process.
Movements operate with process.
Instead of making demands
Instead of making demands
that will be negotiated
that will be negotiated
for years
for years
with elected politicians,
with elected politicians,
which we've already tried
which we've already tried
for years with elected politicians,
elected politicians,
we're trying to demonstrate our values
we're trying to demonstrate our values
and articulate
and articulate
something much bigger than demands.
something much bigger than demands.
We're failing
We're failing
in our culture
in our culture
from a lack of imagination.
from a lack of imagination.
And what we're achieving here
And what we're achieving here
is space
is space
for imagination.
for imagination.
This is not just a revolution,
This is not just a revolution.
it's a collective movement
It's a collective movement
to collectively pull
to collectively pull
a handbrake,
a handbrake,
an emergency brake.
an emergency brake.
This capitalist,
This capitalist,
growth-based economy
growth-based economy
can only survive
can only survive
with growth
with growth
at 3% a year.
at 3% a year.
That means in 24 years,
That means in 24 years,
the size of this economy
the size of this economy
will double.
will double.
Our waterways,
Our waterways,
our fish,
our fish,
our forests, our young people
our young people
can't tolerate that kind of growth.
can't tolerate that kind of growth.
So this is a crisis of growth.
So this is a crisis of growth.
And the shadow side of our economic system
And the shadow side of our economic system
is ecological degradation.
is ecological degradation.
And this is a movement
And this is a movement
because it's diverse.
because it's diverse.
In order to be diverse,
In order to be diverse,
we have to communicate
we have to communicate
with people outside
with people outside
and beyond
and beyond
what we know.
what we know.
We have to communicate with those we don't know.
We have to communicate with those we don't know.
We have to listen.
We have to listen.
This takes compassion
This takes compassion
and imagination.
and imagination.
Compassion is hard work,
Compassion is hard work,
but it's the work worth doing.
but it's the work worth doing.
Listening is hard work,
Listening is hard work,
but it's the work worth doing.
but it's the work worth doing.
So this Occupy movement
So this Occupy movement
has to learn
has to learn
to listen to other views
to listen to other views
in order to cultivate
in order to cultivate
imagination again.
imagination again.
This movement is going to win
This movement is going to win
because it's not hierarchical.
because it's not hierarchical.
You can't meet hierarchy
You can't meet hierarchy
with hierarchy.
with hierarchy.
You have to meet hierarchy
You have to meet hierarchy
with creativity.
with creativity.
The enemy of creativity is anger. When you're angry, you're not creative. Because you think you're right, and you think they're wrong. The 1% do not deserve our hatred. They deserve our compassion. Our hatred will burn us out. So what we've achieved so far is a space where we're slowing down. It's too early to make demands. Instead, we have to stop and wait for our imagination collectively to come together to articulate a way of living based on the values of interdependence, of compassion, of diversity, not anger. When you're angry, don't do anything, don't say anything, go for a walk, find your breath, practice yoga. If you're not into yoga, have a beer, find your breath, but don't do anything. Find out how you feel. And underneath what you feel is creativity. But don't put up the invisible, idealistic Gandhi shield, which when it's philosophical, gets nothing done. Anger's not bad. So you need to take the momentum of your anger. Because the momentum of anger get things done. But it only works if it's merged with creativity. So we need the momentum of anger because the next stage of this movement is going to be demonstrating how when we meet viewpoints opposed to our viewpoints, anger arises. And we need to show that we can meet that anger and opposing viewpoints with creativity. And that creativity is going to show our values. This isn't about making demands. It's creating a space for imagination, and we've accomplished that. Yesterday evening, I was here when a young woman died. This is tragic. But please don't turn her into a symbol. She's not a metaphor. Camping here is not a metaphor. It's not a philosophy. It's being human. What we need is to be human. We want the 1% to become human again. To become human again. To remain human. When the Buddha started assembling a community, he told them to wear robes. And go and find robes out of discarded material. If the material had been eaten by rats. If material had been thrown away, you should take that material and make robes out of it. Whether you like the Buddha or not, this is a wonderful practice. To take what's discarded and bring it into your heart. When there's diversity, We have to take parts of our community
We have to take parts of our community
that we've discarded
that we've discarded
because there are people
because there are people
that we treat like garbage.
we treat like garbage.
There are parts of the ecosystem
There are parts of the ecosystem
that we treat like garbage.
we treat like garbage.
There are parts of ourselves
There are parts of ourselves
that we treat like garbage.
we treat like garbage.
And we have to take these pieces
We have to take these pieces
that we've compartmentalized
we compartmentalize
and bring them into this space.
bring them into this space.
That's how imagination happens. And that's how we'll win.
That's how we'll win.
It's not philosophical.
It's not philosophical.
It's not ideological.
It's not ideological.
It's about showing
It's about showing
and demonstrating simple living,
simple living,
interdependence,
interdependence,
knowing how to take care
knowing how to take care
of our anger,
of our anger,
not meeting anger
not meeting anger
with anger.
with anger.
Is this possible?
Is this possible?
Well, showing it.
We're showing it.
The media
The media
don't know how to report on this
don't know how to report on this
because the media need demands
because the media need demands
and they need violence.
and they need violence,
And we won't give them
and we won't give them
demands
demands
or violence. We won't give them demands
we won't give them demands
because we're articulating a much bigger dream.
because we're articulating a much bigger dream.
And we won't give them violence
We won't give them violence
because we're taking care of our anger.
because we're taking care of our anger.
Those of you who live here,
Those of you who live,
those of you who support this,
those of you who support,
you're undertaking a major responsibility
you're undertaking a major responsibility
to become peacemakers.
to become peacemakers,
Not this absurd term
not this absurd term
of peacekeeper,
of peacekeepers,
but making peace
but making peace
internally
internally,
and making peace
making peace
externally.
externally.
That's why
That's why
this is a spiritual movement,
this is a spiritual movement,
creating a new kind of military,
creating a new kind of military,
making peace,
making peace
simultaneous
simultaneous,
peace,
peace
inward and outward.
inward and outward.
This is the future
This is the future
of the military,
of the military,
is to make peace
to make peace
in all directions.
in all directions,
And that's what we're showing.
and that's what we're showing.
We don't need to articulate that
We don't need to articulate
with
that
lists
lists
and demands.
and demands.
We need to show it.
We need to show it.
Don't be afraid
Don't be afraid
to talk about love.
to talk about love.
Don't be afraid
Don't be afraid
to talk about kindness.
to talk about kindness.
When we lose something,
When we lose something,
when we lose someone we love,
when we lose someone we love,
when we finish an exhale,
when we finish an exhale,
when we lose a paradigm,
when we lose a paradigm,
we're always so quick
we're always so quick
to find a new lover,
to find a new lover,
a new paradigm,
new paradigm.
and it never works.
It never works.
Well, one night stands
One night stands
are kind of fun,
are kind of fun,
but they don't last
they don't last
because we're too quick.
because we're too quick.
And when we let go
And when we let go,
and pull the brakes,
pull the brakes,
we have to let there be
we
space.
have to let there be space.
And out of that space,
Out of that space,
we can articulate
we can articulate
and imagine
and imagine
and sow the seeds
sow the seed
of a different way of living.
of a different way of living.
So don't feel under pressure
So don't feel under pressure
to figure out demands.
to figure out demands.
We need to enter the space
We need to enter the space
that's only achieved
that's only achieved
when we pull the handbrake
when we pull the handbrake
and we show in our bodies
we show in our body
and we show in this camp
and we show in this camp
that this movement
that this movement
is organized.
is organized.
It has structure.
It has structure.
You can have structure
You can have structure
without hierarchy.
without hierarchy.
You can have structure
You can have structure
and creativity
and creativity
without oppression,
without oppression,
without sexism,
without sexism,
without classism.
without class.
And this is what we're showing.
And this is what we're showing.
But it's painful.
But it's painful.
And what I worry about
And what I worry about
is you'll leave here
is you'll leave here
And you'll forget that this movement transcends this park. Today, Occupy is in 1980 cities. It's much bigger than this. Thank you for listening to me. I've been to many Occupies, and everyone is different. And they all have trouble. And they're all winning. Because they have trouble. And they're working it out. And that's really hard work. But it's the work worth doing. Thank you.